Welcome to the Dinosaur Review for Kids podcast, a show all about reviewing dinosaurs on a scale of 1 to 10 fossils before only the elite terrible lizards make it into the prehistoric cage match. This program is presented by the Stomp Tromp Roar Company and can be heard within all the rock layers across the planet. Grab your dinosaurs and your official scorecard because it's now time to dig for dinosaurs. Here's your Mesozoic host, Dinosaur Ranger Anthony.
Finally, Dinosaur Ranger Anthony has come back to the Dinosaur Review for Kids podcast. If you can smell what Ranger Anthony is cooking. I think I should have said podcasting. Who knows what the rock's been cooking? But nonetheless, welcome back all my junior paleontologists to the Dinosaur Review for Kids podcast. Now, I'm your wrestling superstar, host, Dinosaur Ranger Anthony. Now, I might not be a professional wrestler, but I'm definitely a champion. Just go ahead and look at my championship title that I have here on my shoulder. I am the undefeated champion of the Dinosaur Review for Kids, baby! And forget about The Rock, we're here to talk about fossils, am I right? We want to know more about the next dinosaur genus. Now, my family and I just got back from an absolutely amazing trip down to San Antonio, Texas, which included tickets to the WWE event called the Royal Rumble. Now, sadly, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson didn't make his fabulous comeback, but it was still an electrifying show. And I'm even wearing my Rock shirt for today's podcast. Now, the Royal Rumble, everybody, is when two wrestlers start in the match or start in the ring, and every 90 seconds, a new wrestler joins them in the ring for a total of 30 wrestlers. Now, the only way to eliminate the other wrestlers from the match is to throw them over the top ropes, and both of their feet have to hit the floor. Then the last wrestler standing in the ring is the winner, and they get a title match at WrestleMania. So today's podcast theme is dinosaur wrestling. What you gonna do, junior paleontologist? Now, as a boy, everyone, I loved watching wrestling. The WCW, the WWE, the NWO, Goldberg, Sting, The Rock, Stone Cold, Kane. So many awesome superstars. I even wrestled in high school for the Millard South Patriots. But sadly, I stopped watching wrestling when I was a teenager. And sometimes kids at your school, they can make you feel bad if you like to watch wrestling, or you like to watch Barney, or you like dinosaurs, you like to play video games. And you guys never let anybody tell you you can't do something you love. We only live once, YOLO. So if you like to watch wrestling, you like to play video games, you like comic books or dinosaurs, any kind of activity, any kind of toy, then never let somebody tell you can't do the things you love. Never. So always like dinosaurs. Now, you guys, after college, I started watching wrestling again, and I started reading about dinosaurs again. I started returning all those things that I loved from my childhood and putting them into my adult life. It was amazing. And hey, guess what? I think Dinosaur Ranger Elace, my wife, loves watching wrestling now even more than I do. Isn't that crazy? Now, my family and I just had so much fun at the Wrestling Royal Rumble pay-per-view event down at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio, Texas. And if only there were dinosaurs in the match, but I think maybe they're saving that for another time. Now, before we grab our wrestling gear and ring that wrestling bell for our next dinosaur review, let's update you guys all on some dinopreneur news. You can't see me. Oh wait, maybe you can if you're watching me on YouTube. But hey, what else did we do on my San Antonio business trip last week, you ask? Well, let me tell you guys what we all did. First, we started off with a visit to the San Antonio Zoo. Some of the memorable animals were the hippos, the rhinos, and those flamingos. All those pink flamingos were squawking at each other like a bunch of dinosaurs down by the watering hole. We stopped at the Rainforest Cafe for dinner, and I was almost attacked by a gorilla. That's right, a gorilla almost attacked me, and you guys can see a picture of this on my Facebook page. Just search Stomp Chomp Roar on Facebook. We had tons of overpriced food, but the atmosphere was amazing. Then we stopped over at the Alamo on Friday. What an amazing part of history. No trip for a first-timer to San Antonio wouldn't be right without visiting the Alamo that was built back in 1718. We checked out the Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum. They had a huge mammoth cast, and I took an awesome picture trying to grab onto its tusks. They had tons of odd artifacts. It was a super cool museum. We did the Riverwalk cruise. So you guys, down in downtown San Antonio, they have this area full of all kinds of shops and restaurants, and right down the middle of it is a tiny little river, and you can walk on both sides, and you can also take cruises that go down the river, and it kind of makes a loop around downtown. So we took the cruise, had an awesome tour guide named Joel, so thank you, Joel. He was the perfect tour guide, and as a public speaker, everyone, I always love listening to other entertainers and learning what they do well and what tips and techniques I can take away and even put into my shows. We went to the Whip Museum, and that's where we saw the fossil specimen of today's genus. We went to the Natural Bridge Caverns, and we saw some ammonite fossils in the cave walls. We went down nearly 200 feet from the Natural Bridge. We went to SeaWorld. We saw the sea lions, the orcas, the beluga whales, and the dolphins. Tons of marine wildlife. We had tons of fun. My oldest daughter, Junior Dinosaur Ranger Cecilia, even did this crazy ride where they lifted her tons of feet up into the air, and then she comes flying down over the lagoon. It was so crazy to see her on that. We went to Bubba Gump Shrimp. You guys, I love Forrest Gump, and I always stopping at a Bubba Gump Shrimp. We had T-Rex shrimp, we had Triceratops shrimp, we had Parasaurolophus shrimp, Stegosaurus shrimp, Brachiosaurus shrimp, all kinds of shrimp. I love all kinds of seafood. Now, you guys, one of the main reasons for our trip was to go to the Royal Rumble, like I already mentioned, but what was the other reason? And it was to meet the one and only Dinosaur George. He's someone I call my dinosaur mentor, and I started listening to his podcast back in 2018, and he has taught me so much over the last 4.5 years, and it was a dream to finally get the chance to meet him. We had dinner at Las Palapas. He was so nice, greeted me and my family right away, you guys. We had an awesome conversation about our businesses, his 25 years in the industry, and then guess what? He even invited us back to his house after dinner. We checked out his studio, tons of fossils. He even gave me a handful. It was an arms full of all kinds of replica fossils I could take home and put into my shows. He signed my Dinosaur George kids books. We took some great pictures and just had so much fun. So thank you so much, Dinosaur George, for dinner, the fossils, everything you've done for me over the last few years, teaching me so much about my business. Stomp Chomp Roar, we just had an awesome time, and thank you for making our trip a little bit more special. We even went and visited his store and museum over at Trader's Village on our way to SeaWorld, and it was just so cool. They've got so much stuff in there, so much merchandise, tons of animals, fossils, kits. So cool. You guys have to stop there at Trader's Village. So Dinosaur George, thank you for bringing so much joy into the world. Now, you guys, a quick update about my 3D printed fossil skulls. I've received my Brachiosaurus skull, but I'm still waiting on my Carnotaurus, my Pteranodon pieces. So once I receive all 3 of those items, I'll get some pictures or maybe even a video onto social media. So make sure you're following me on Facebook. Just search Stomp Chomp Roar. Now, you guys, we just have 2 shout outs before we start today's review. Shout out to the Gingerbread Preschool, the Gingerbread House Preschool. Dinosaurs love the Gingerbread House, and I did those shows on Monday, our first day back at work, you guys, and no one told me how cold it was back in Omaha, but it was frigid cold. It felt like -3 when we landed back in Omaha on the airplane, and it was just perfect that this this daycare was first on my list because the kids' smiles just warmed my heart, you guys. It was the perfect visit on that first cold day back here in Omaha. Then shout out to Bethany First Steps Childcare. We're visiting this childcare for the very first time, and we're going there later today. So I cannot wait to take Paleo and let him entertain all the kids about prehistoric life. He's super hungry, ready for some fish, so I can't wait to visit you guys today. Now, you guys, let's go ahead and grab our wrestling boots, our finger tape, and our official scorecard, because it's time to ring that bell for our next dinosaur review. Who's next? Here we go, all my junior paleontologists. We've made it inside the wrestling ring for today's awesome review. And today the dinosaur is no one other than the Acrocanthosaurus. The Acrocanthosaurus. Now, what does this name mean? It means high-spined lizard. The high-spined lizard. And even though its name means the high-spined lizard, it has a smaller spine than the Spinosaurus. Now, what kind of dinosaur is the Acrocanthosaurus? What is its dinosaur order? This one's a saurischian. Those are the lizard hip dinosaurs. Then it's a theropod. Those bipedal carnivores. It walks on two legs, eats all kinds of meat. And then it falls into a dinosaur family. But which one? Is it an Allosaurid? A Carcharodontosaurid? Right here in my dinosaur lab, I have my Allosaurus toy, I have a Carcharodontosaurus toy, but which one is it a family member of? The Allosaurids? The Carcharodontosaurids? Well, you guys, when they originally found the fossil specimens of the Acrocanthosaurus, they originally thought it was a type of Allosaurid. Then they thought it maybe one time, maybe it's a Megalosaurid or a Spinosaurid. But most recently, scientists agree it's a type of Carcharodontosaurid. So a saurischian, a theropod, and a Carcharodontosaurid. Now, how big was the Acrocanthosaurus? Its length, its height, its weight? Well, this dinosaur is a massive meat eater. It's coming in at those top apex predators of the theropods. So our Acrocanthosaurus is up to 38 feet long, or 11.5 meters, about 13 feet high, or 4 meters, and can weigh 15,000 pounds, just like some of those big wrestlers, you guys, those big sumo wrestlers. Well, quite not that big, but still 15,000 pounds for this dinosaur, our Acrocanthosaurus. Now, they believe it's about fourth on the list in size for those meat eaters. We have the Spinosaurus at the top, the Giganotosaurus, the T-Rex, and then we come in at our Acrocanthosaurus, about 38 feet long. Now, even though it's not the longest of the meat eaters, it was still the apex predator of its time, and that means it was at the top of the food chain, where it lived, and in what time period it lived in. Now, how fast was this dinosaur? How fast was the Acrocanthosaurus? This meat eater is coming in around 15, maybe 18 miles per hour. It's bipedal, walking on two legs. It's a quick predator, but it's not going to be as fast as some of those speedy thieves, or even our Tyrannosaurus rex. And we believe that because its femur was longer than its tibia bone. What bones are those? Well, you guys, the femur is the leg bone above the knee. It's thigh. And the tibia is the leg bone below the knee, so like its shin. So since its femur was longer than its tibia, it gives the suggestion that it was not a fast runner, just like some of the other dinosaurs where it would be a little bit reversed. Now, what weapons or defense did this dinosaur have? What characteristics does our Acrocanthosaurus have? Well, this one will start with its skull, its head. We always love looking at the skulls of the dinosaurs. And the Acrocanthosaurus has a long, low, and much more narrow skull, about 4 feet in length. Now, compared to our T-Rex, they have about a 5.5-foot skull. So our Acrocanthosaurus about a 1.5 foot lower or less in length than our T-Rex. And it's much more narrow. The T-Rex has a very wide skull, giving it a great bite force. Our Acrocanthosaurus a much more narrow bite force, a much more narrow skull, and not as much of a bite force. But they might have some more teeth than the T-Rex, so they could have 60 to maybe even 70 sharp curved teeth. Now, after their teeth, we see their fenestra. What's a fenestra, Dinosaur Ranger Anthony? Well, the fenestra are the skull openings. So when you look at a skull of a dinosaur, you see all these holes in them. Now, one of them is the eye, one of them's the nose, and the other ones are fenestra. Those are just all the skull openings. It's making their head lightweight. It's making their head be able to stay cool, keeping their brain cool, like an air conditioner. And it's keeping it lightweight, like I mentioned, so their skull isn't going to be super heavy and just fall to the ground. Well, our Acrocanthosaurus has a very large fenestra in front of the eye hole, and it's about 1/4 the size of its entire skull. So that fenestra maybe could have made their skin, could have gave maybe somewhat of an impression in the skin, in their skull, you guys, made their head look a little bit different, and it's also keeping it lightweight, like I mentioned, so it's not going to be very heavy. Now, they also have a small nasal ridge. So up there on their snout, you guys, on the dinosaur nose of our Acrocanthosaurus, they have a small nasal ridge that runs down their snout. So from the tip of their snout, and it goes up to about their eyeballs or their orbit. We kind of see something similar in the Allosaurus. You see that little ridge up there. Somewhat, not so much a head crest, more just of a little ridge, probably giving them a little bit more, probably using it for display. They can tell each other apart and whatnot, and between the species, between their friends and family, maybe even to attract a mate. So they have that little nasal ridge. Now, they also have an S-shaped brain, so a little bit different shaped brains than like our T-Rex, and something really cool. Our Acrocanthosaurus has the spine, just like a Spinosaurus. No, not really. It's not as cool as the Spinosaurus, but it is still a really cool characteristic of this meat-eating dinosaur. So the Acrocanthosaurus has a row of 12-inch high neural spines that run from its neck all the way down its tail. So it has a small spine that goes all the way down its back. Now, the Spinosaurus has about a 6-foot sail or spine. So this one is a lot smaller, only about 12 inches to a foot high, but it runs from its neck all the way down its tail. So it does run a bigger length, neck to tail, whereas the Spinosaurus, it's just there at its hips, on its back, in the middle of its back right there. So this spine, you guys, what's the Acrocanthosaurus using with this 12-inch, really long spine? And we really aren't sure. Maybe it could be for defense a little bit, maybe even display. Maybe they could tell each other apart. Could it have different impressions, different colors on it? Maybe they're using it for fat storage, kind of like a buffalo does today. They save their fat in their hump on their back, and all throughout the winter, their body burns the fat. So when there's less food, they can burn the fat in the fat storage. So maybe that's what our Acrocanthosaurus is doing. Those spines connect to their vertebrae or their backbone in their body, and scientists think that maybe there was even a muscle that went all along the ridge of those spines on their back. So I believe it probably was a little bit for display, maybe even some fat storage, probably not so much for defense, because they're already a predator. They're hunting. They're not wanting to not be hunted, and they're the apex predator of their time, like we mentioned. Now, they have 3-fingered claws on them, strong, long, and heavy tail, those strong legs for hunting for all kinds of food. And another interesting fact I read is our Acrocanthosaurus, their skull points about 25% downward. So right here I have a protractor from geometry class where I met Dinosaur Ranger Elise. We met in geometry class and we've been together ever since back in high school. But right here I have my protractor in my dinosaur lab, and I've got it set to 25. Now, they believe, you guys, the Acrocanthosaurus is pointing its head downward 25%. And they can see that by looking at the ear canals. When they took an image of its skull, they could see the ear canals and know somehow that its head probably pointed 25% downward. So our Acrocanthosaurus is always looking down, looking for all kinds of prey, because this one is a carnivore. It's eating all kinds of meat. It wants food in its belly for sure. Now, where did this dinosaur live? And how long did the Acrocanthosaurus species or genus live during that Mesozoic era? Well, I have this one in the rock layers at 113 to 110 million years ago during that Middle Cretaceous period. It was found originally in Oklahoma in the Antler Formation, but it's also been found in states like Wyoming. We find footprints down in Texas, when we find teeth in Arizona, all the way to Maryland, from coast to coast, just like Shane McMahon, jumping coast to coast, from the west coast to the east coast, Arizona to Maryland. We find teeth in those two states. So this apex predator, the Acrocanthosaurus, could have been possibly all over North America during the Middle Cretaceous period. But remember, we have that western interior seaway that split North America during the Cretaceous period, so that means it would have had to live on both sides of that body of water. But maybe the Acrocanthosaurus is going to use its spines, like the sail of the Spinosaurus. Could the Acrocanthosaurus have jumped down into the waters of the western interior seaway and gone hunting for all sorts of marine creatures, just like that Spinosaurus? Huh. Probably not. And that's because our Acrocanthosaurus is a carnivore. They eat meat and not a piscivore like the Spinosaurus, who eats all kinds of fish and maybe even some sharks out of the water. If the Acrocanthosaurus came up to the coast of the seaway, they probably would have just put down their beach towel and soaked up the rays from the sun on the beach. Or maybe they even made a sand volcano. Would that just be cool or what? Our Acrocanthosaurus uses its 60 to 70 curve-shaped teeth to eat other dinosaurs like sauropods, Alamosaurus, Paluxysaurus, maybe the duckbills, or even ceratopsians. Now, it was found originally, like I said, in Oklahoma in the early 1940s, and it was named in 1950 by the scientists Stovall and Langston Jr. So everybody, that is a little bit about the Acrocanthosaurus, or the high-spined lizard. What is going to be our score on the official Dinosaur Review for Kids podcast? Is it going to be 1 fossil for some of those weakest dinosaurs, 10 fossils for some of those strongest dinosaurs? Remember, our Acrocanthosaurus up to 38 feet long, 13 feet high, 15,000 pounds. It's not the biggest carnivore, but it is the apex predator of its time. It's running about 15 miles per hour. They have a long, low, and narrow 4-foot skull with 60 to 70 teeth. They have a small nasal ridge that runs up its snout, and they have that row of 12-inch high spines that run from its neck all the way down its tail, 3-fingered claws, and a heavy tail back there behind them. So what is going to be our score on the official results? Is it going to make it into our next cage match? Is it going to get a good enough score to go to Dinosaur Mania? Well, you guys, let's give it its score. At the end of the day, our Acrocanthosaurus is going to come in at a 9.0. 9.0 for the Acrocanthosaurus. We have another 9 on the Dinosaur Review for Kids podcast. This one deserves it. An apex predator of its time. It was the high-spined lizard. It's the Acrocanthosaurus. Woo! Was that an electrifying review or what? What did everyone think about the score? Another 9.0 on the Dinosaur Review for Kids podcast. Do you think the Acrocanthosaurus could have taken on a Giganotosaurus? What about a Spinosaurus? Or even a Tyrannosaurus Rex? I think today's dinosaur genus could have definitely held its ground. And it's gotta be tough in order to protect the Alamo. And hey, do you think dinosaurs really wrestled? Wouldn't that be funny to see those big theropods trying to wrestle with their tiny arms? The T-Rex would have had a disadvantage for sure, especially against today's high-spined lizard, the Acrocanthosaurus. Now everyone, the stage is set. That's right, it's time for our next prehistoric cage match, baby! And for the second time, it's theropod versus sauropod. It's the Acrocanthosaurus versus the Alamosaurus. Which Texas dinosaur will reign supreme and be named our next prehistoric cage match champion? Baby, it's gonna be so much fun. I cannot wait to enter the arena. Now everybody, a quick joke before we go today. Before we go watch more wrestling, who is the Acrocanthosaurus's favorite WWE wrestler? Who could it be? Who is the Acrocanthosaurus's favorite WWE wrestler? It's The Rock! Do you get it? The Rock! Dinosaur fossils, they're kind of like rocks. Well, technically, they're hard in minerals, but you guys get the point, right? Dwayne Johnson, otherwise known as The Rock, used to be a wrestler before he was doing all kinds of awesome movies in Hollywood. Now, that's it for today, everyone. It's almost time for Dinosaur Ranger Anthony to head back into the arena, into the wrestling ring. I'm actually just going to a daycare for today's shows at the Bethany First Steps Child Care. It's going to be so much fun going and teaching these kids all about dinosaurs. But maybe Paleo and I will get into a little bit of a scuffle. We'll start fighting because Paleo loves eating all kinds of fish. But we'll make sure to be friendly at the daycare. It's going to be so much fun. Well, you guys, our next prehistoric cage match is on the way. Give me a couple weeks and I'll get this one uploaded for everyone. And it's going to be at the one and only Dinosaur Mania! But remember, my name is Dinosaur Ranger Anthony, your professional wrestler. Host of the Dinosaur Review for Kids podcast. And as always, keep digging for dinosaurs. Woo!